Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our budget deliberations this evening. I'd like to acknowledge we are holding our meeting in the territory of the Wasanic Nation, and I'll call to order our special council meeting of Tuesday, February 26th to order. We'll begin with a public participation period. I'd ask that presenters or speakers try to keep your remarks to about 3 minutes, and please come to the front, give your name and address, and press the little button to bring on the red light for the microphone. And I'll call for speakers for the first time. I'll call for speakers for a second time.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I was afraid you're going to call a third time and I wouldn't have stood up. My name is John Trelevin. I live in Sydney, 51134 3rd Street. And I rise for a number of reasons. One, of course, is to wish you well with the budget deliberations. Mayor Cliff McNeil-Smith spoke recently to Sydney by the Sea Rotary, much like your inaugural address, Mr. Mayor, full of vision and drive and imagination. And on the issue of taxation, I thought I was listening to myself, or perhaps David, or one or two others in the audience. You expressed concern about the years of increase beyond inflation and beyond population growth. And of course, it's against that background and the needs of the community that you meet annually. I do want to remind new members of council that as a grumpy taxpayer of Greater Victoria, we have seen fit on a couple of occasions to recognize the splendid budget process that this town benefits from, and that's Randy and of course Andrew Hissick and the staff. If every one of the other communities in this Greater Victoria area used a similar process, most are pretty good, the community would be stronger. So we're looking forward to what we've seen in years past. Third thing, at budget time, you get to make comments about just about everything, right? That's the nature of our democracy. And I would just comment that as a voter and a resident of Sydney, I was so delighted with the inauguration of the mayor and the new council to see that the mayor is meeting with his counterparts in North Saanich and Central Saanich very regularly, and began to do that from the beginning. Because what I think most people don't realize in Greater Victoria is that, in fact, the industrial and transportation and tourism hub for a city of 400,000 people lie in these three communities. Which means, among other things, your budget deliberations, while they must focus on Sydney, and particularly focus on people who vote, have an impact way, way beyond these council chambers or the council chamber in North Saanich and Central Saanich. I know that you know that. It's a difficult environment in which to make the decisions that you're called upon to make. And because your decisions are amplified much more so than, let's say, Metchosin or the Highlands. I mean, the task is more difficult. In closing, I just want to make, as a citizen of Sydney, I just want to make another comment. And I wasn't here for earlier meetings, but I did watch the presentation by the Shawwish Discovery Centre to the council, and I listened to the debate. And I may be wrong here, but I think something needs to be added to the quite detailed discussions that have taken place in this council chamber, and I think probably beyond it. Let us remember what the Shawwish Discovery Centre represents. The 10,000 square feet in Grant Rogers building was one of the community amenities that was negotiated by the town of Sydney to enable that project to go forward. And the fact that for 10 years, a group of dynamic volunteers and staff have brought the center to where it is today was a key part in the investment that Grant made in this community, and that has continued to bring hugely beneficial economic impacts to the whole downtown area. And I think that this community owes a debt of gratitude to the courage of the council and the mayor at the time to negotiate the construction of that building, the permissions, and the courage of a group of citizens and others who said, well, we can figure out a way to use the space. The fact that in 10 years' time it has turned out that, well, guess what, it's a little hard to accumulate $250,000 to maintain the physical infrastructure, well, we now know that. The council didn't know that when the votes were taken. The volunteers who stepped forward and others, the professionals who've run it, didn't know that then. We know that now.
John, just to interrupt, if you could just finish your final remarks. Thank you.
I support the request from the Shaw Ocean Discovery Centre as on the same basis as a citizen of Sydney. I'm proud to see that there's public contribution to Mary Winspear and to the Sydney Museum. Wish you well with your deliberations.
Thank you, John Trillett. I'll call for a third time if there are any other speakers this evening. Seeing none, I'll close public participation. Thank you, and we'll look for approval of our agenda.
So move.
Second.
Those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll now move to the main event, our financial plan for the 2019 to 2023 period. We have a presentation by our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Hissick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, members of the public, and my fellow budget managers who are here supporting the work that they've had so much influence on along the way. These are the people that put it together. I'm just the guy who fronts it at this time of year, but really it's a group effort. So we've already heard two presentations. Tonight we'll have a brief recap of where we stand. And then I would like to propose consideration of budget by these areas: water and sewer, then capital, supplementals, and then the remainder of the budget. So following the opening summary, I'm proposing that Council makes changes in those aforementioned areas by resolution. And the goal is to try and complete the budget tonight by getting resolutions related to any additions, deletions, or changes to the budget, and then approval of the various components one at a time. So this is stage 3 of the budget. We've already introduced it, had our initial discussions where nothing was substantially changed, but we had some good discussion. And tonight, an updated presentation for the benefit of both the public and council. And any direction from previous meetings has been incorporated largely in the form of a staff report on the agenda. And the goal, as I mentioned, is for approval of the financial plan tonight. If that isn't accomplished, then we are free to schedule additional meetings, either tomorrow night if no new information is required, or for some subsequent date if we do need to go back and do some digging. Now, a brief note about the report on your agenda. In reviewing it over the last few days, we picked up on 2 minor errors. So the tax-funded capital projects that we're recommending deferral of, it totals $88,600, not $86,000. So what we're going into this meeting with is a potential, if all those are approved, of a tax increase of 4.32%, not 4.35. It's minor, but I thought I'd point it out. The other discrepancy was in one of the gas tax funded projects that we are recommending for reallocation. It's the First Street Sidewalk project for $42,000. I have been informed that that project was actually completed in late 2018 through developer contributions. It relates to the work in front of that development right by Totem Park. So that is off the table. And it was done through non-gas tax funds. So that $42,000 is ready to reallocate should council wish. And again, I want to reiterate what 1% means. 1% increase costs the average household about $1.20 per month. So for 4.32%, we're talking about $5.18 per month to the average household. So obviously, you don't want to minimize the impact of any increase, and it's not my intention, but we do need to put this into perspective. So if you're haggling at the end of the night about $10,000, you need to know that's a difference of 11 cents to the average household. If you still want to do it, by all means, but let's do it in that context, please. And for us, 1% of taxes raises 113,000 some odd dollars in revenue. For a place like the city of Victoria, 1% raises well over $1 million. So they have more money to play with just a 1% increase. And also it has a greater impact on the average household. Quick recap of what the major impacts are on the tax increase. So an additional $236,200 for tax-funded capital. That's before the changes proposed in the staff report. Reserve contributions adding another $60,000. Debt servicing, a net increase of about $133,000, largely, entirely for the CSB, with some offsets there from the BC ambulance lease. The employer health tax is about $132,000. Supplemental requests, a net increase of $159,000 if all are approved. And just as a reminder, those are built into the tax increase. So if any are not approved or cut back, then the increase goes down. And the RCMP contract increase, a modest $50,000 this year. A big impact on the supplemental side is requests from external agencies such as the Shaw Center, the BIA, Chamber, and a couple of others. And just to reiterate this chart and table from the last meeting, we're at $931,000 annually in community support, if you will. That's for things like arts and culture, for economic development, and other similar semi-municipal services. And that represents 7.6% of our net operating budgets. And it's grown significantly over the last 5 years, as you can see. And that has, we'll talk briefly later about inflation versus tax increases. And these are the kinds of additional services that cannot be accommodated through merely inflationary increases. We've seen this twice now. Just a quick breakdown of how the tax-funded expenditures are allocated in our organization. The biggest chunk is police protection, followed by public works. General government encompasses a whole bunch of administrative functions, fire and emergency, and so on. Debt servicing is 3.9%. Our general operating revenues, you see just over 2/3 come from taxation. So if we have increases in our expenditure side, the most likely source to cover those is through increases in taxation, unfortunately. Who gets your tax dollars? We collect for a variety of agencies in the tax notice, and for a residential taxpayer, only about 53% stays in the municipality, whereas for a commercial property, it's less than that. It's only 44%. So we have less control on the overall tax bill for a commercial property. A little bit more detail on that. So residential assessments make up, this is going back to last year, which is our last full year of taxation. The residential assessments made up 87% of the total assessments, and yet they generated only 70% of the taxes. So commercial properties, on the other hand, they made up 11% of the tax base, if you will, but they generate over 25% of our tax revenues. So when we talk about certain items in the budget that you can say relate more to the business sector, that's a very good rationale for why consideration should be given to those items, those economic development initiatives. This is interesting and, kind of pretty if you add more colors, but what this does is it shows the taxes paid by a residential and a commercial property, each valued at $500,000. So it shows that over the years, on the residential side, it's been roughly 2.3 to 2.9%. Well, the commercial side is 2.3 to 2.9% greater than that of the residential side because of the differential in tax rates. And what this really illustrates is you can see the taxes going down here. That's not reality, obviously, when you look at the average household, but remember, we're looking at a valuation of $500,000 here. So as values go up, rates go down, and that's what the result is. So it appears that it's going down, but it's only for that $500,000 value house, not the average. So in 2018, a house valued at $500,000 would have paid $1,163 in municipal tax, whereas a commercial property valued at $500,000 would have paid $3,300 in municipal tax. We've talked about surplus funding and that we use this as the first line of defense against increases. So we've got $350,000 in the budget to prevent overtaxation, and we fully expect to break even at the end of the year despite earmarking that for balancing the budget. So the 2018 figures are not quite finalized, but it looks like we're going to generate a very, very small operating surplus for last year. And this year we're not off to a great start with the snow clearing budget, but I remain optimistic about our operations for the year. So once we've applied that surplus funding, the last line of defense is a property tax increase, and we try and keep those to a minimum every year, but costs do go up in whatever industry you're in. It's unfortunately one of those realities that we have to react to. Some of the new taxation is covered by growth in the tax base from new construction, and that's about $200,000 for 2019. So you've seen this before. It shows what the impacts are and how they're mitigated. So about 6.24% in changes to the core budget. Incremental items for supplementals add another 1.47. We deduct the new tax revenue from growth. That reduces it to 5.95. This was the opening chart, and it led to this opening estimate on the average household. So we were looking at an increase of roughly $85 before the parcel taxes. Now, I'm not assuming that all the changes in the staff report are going to be approved, but if they were to be approved as a starting point in further deliberations, this is what it would look like. So the tax-funded capital is the only thing that's decreased here. So it reduces the overall impact to 4.32%, which then in turn reduces the impact to the average household to $62 for the year, or about $5 a month. And I've updated this table as well on the same basis that we would be starting at 4.32 if these changes are approved. So cumulatively over the last 5 years, inflation is 8.3%, and tax increase as amended would be 11.2, or roughly 2.9% greater than inflation. But the important thing, as I've tried to reiterate over the years, is the CPI increase does not allow for changes to the basket of goods that are being measured. And frankly, there is always more being added to the basket when you talk about taxes, and that's not the case for CPI. The new services, things like changes in service level that we're adding, or external requests, or changes that are outside of our control. So over the last 5 years, we've added some of those non-discretionary items, as well as some things that we did have control over, like more funding to our community partners. And those are the things that have taken tax increases above inflation. So the most likely sources for reduction, we've covered this before. It's not the general operating budget because of that surplus funding. It's really in tax-funded capital and in the new stuff, the supplemental items. That concludes the bulk of my intro, and I'm suggesting that we follow in this order in considering the various aspects of the budget. So as we move to each one, I'll provide another very brief intro, and then council can have at it, if that's okay. So utility budgets. Sewer operating, you know by now what that includes and how it's funded. It's parcel tax and user fees. So we are proposing an increase in the parcel taxes for the first time in a number of years of $5 for strata and $10 for single family and non-strata properties. And the sewer user rate is to remain the same at $7.40 per unit. On the water side, again, it's parcel tax and user rate funded. The parcel tax has been at $60 since 2012, and I'm proposing a $5 increase this year, whereas the user fees have been at $6.27 per 1,000 gallons since 2011, and we're proposing an increase of 23 cents. So at the last meeting, we were asked to quantify what the impact of that 23-cent increase would be on the average household. That is covered in your report, but I'll repeat it here, in that because it's all consumption-based, it's really difficult to call something an average consumption. But based on staff experience, we've picked $6,000 as a typical household. If you use more or less, it's fairly easy to extrapolate this impact on your household. And for those that are extremely low users, that are below the minimum quarterly charge, they would see no impact at all. So the 23 cents per 1,000 gallons would lead to an increase of $1.38 per quarter, or approximately $5.52 per year for the average household. So that's a very modest increase in my estimation, but it has a very big impact on overall operations. It's the same comment I had about taxes. I mean, $5 a month for the average resident. You can call it modest, but the additional revenue it gives us to provide more support and services is huge. So what's small for the individual is big for us. Another way to look at it, let's say you have a postal rate increase of 1 or 2 cents. For me, mailing the odd letter, it's going to feel like nothing, but for the overall corporation, it has a huge impact, and those are the things that keep it going. So if council is ready, based on the new information, to approve the water and sewer budgets, I would suggest this resolution or something similar, but if there are changes or additional questions, feel free.
Councillor Wainwright.
I'm happy with the discussion we've had about the water and sewer budgets, and I'm not proposing any cuts. So I'd like to move that we approve those two budgets as presented.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hissick.
Thank you. Moving on, sorry.
Sorry.
Okay.
Councillor Wainwright?
So I appreciate the suggestion of looking at the capital before the supplemental, but I actually see some merit in doing it in the opposite order. And my thinking about it is this. We've got a couple of big ticket supplemental items, and I don't know where council's going to land on them. I have my hit list of things that I am considering as cuts. I've got orders of priority. The two supplemental items I'm thinking about most are the request from the SBIA and the Shaw Center. And I know, where I feel on those particular items. If it turned out that the majority felt like cutting both of those, I would be a lot less aggressive about some of the things on my capital list. If both of them were to survive and go in, then I would be fairly aggressive about my list. And if we do it the other way around and deal with the capital stuff first, my thinking is not informed by what happens to those supplemental items. So I would actually like to have the discussion, at least of those two, before we get into the capital.
Does another councillor wish to comment on the order of supplementals versus capital? Councillor Rintoul.
No, I would just comment. I'm fine with that. I think that's a healthy suggestion. There's probably some people in the room that are interested in that being addressed as well. But my preference would be, if we're going to deal with supplemental, that we do it all at once and not dive back and forth.
Okay, so I think we're in consensus on doing that.
Supplemental requests are one-time or ongoing additions to existing service levels, either internal or external request. And these items have been described in your binder, discussed at previous meetings, and followed up with additional information from the requesters. Just an outline of the major ones. The OCP review has been previously discussed as 100,000 over 2 years, with some additional side projects, if you will, separately funded. The Shaw Center is asking for an additional 60,000 this year, and a further 65, I believe, starting the following year. SBIA, they're asking for 50 this year and an additional 15 in future years. Ray Creek Dam assessment is 25. Chamber of Commerce is asking for 20, and Artsy is also asking for 20. A number of smaller requests total 71,000, but they're subject to discussion as well. That's all I have. Please have at it.
So just for clarification through the staff, with regards to the numerous supplementals, do we need a motion either way, either in support or to remove?
We can assume that unless they're removed, they're approved. So I don't think we need to go through every single one and approve them individually. If you're happy with that methodology, then please let's discuss on the ones you want to amend or cut entirely.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Garnett.
If it's possible, can we leave the previous file? Perfect.
Okay, if we have Councillor Wainwright.
So I'd like to start the discussion off with the Shaw Center, and I'm in support of that one, continuing. And I guess I appreciate the various questions that have been asked about it. It is a large expenditure. I wouldn't be unconditionally supporting the future years, because I would like to, if we are going to, and I do support having that in the budget and our financial plan, I'd like to ensure that funding is conditional on performance. and we can deal with the performance issues later. You know, I think we could spend too much time tonight trying to drill down into that, and that wouldn't be appropriate. My rationale really is that the economic benefits in terms of attracting people to Sydney are quite significant. It has other environmental, educational, you know, cultural benefits, but I'll simply focus on the economic ones. We've had, if you read the letters of support, they're coming from organizations that I think can reasonably speak to the economic value of having the center operating. And considering the amount of money, it's a proven economic benefit as opposed to a pilot project or whatever. It would seem to me that it's much better. I think that I would, from my point of view, that is a much higher priority to support than the other economic development initiatives. So that's kind of my rationale.
Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Likewise, I'm generally in support of the center's application for additional funding. I have some concern as we go out beyond year 2. I guess I would suggest around the $140,000 annual increase that you're seeking. I asked the question when Graham and Pauline presented previously around staffing levels and around your ability to seek grant funding, support financially from other sources. I do think, like Councillor Wainwright, that the centre is a tremendous benefit to the town, both economically and culturally. I think it's important to support it. But I don't think the town can be your only source of putting your hand out and looking for support in that context. I think there are other levels of government. I think there are corporations on the peninsula and even closer to home that should be approached, and you should be actively seeking support from those organizations. So to be very clear, when we get down into the weeds in due course around metrics, one of the things that I definitely want to see is this $140,000 ask, beyond year 2, to come down and to see it replaced with a revenue source from another level of government or from capital partners in the community or corporate sponsors. So I'm a little concerned that the long-term recipe is too reliant on the town, but I'm very, very happy to support your efforts and what the center has to offer this community. So that's where I stand, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for those. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I'm in general agreement with Councillor Wainwright and Councillor Rintoul as well. I know Councillor O'Keefe has raised quite a lot of questions, as has Councillor Fallett, and I went through some of like the RBC's financial, or the Royal BC Museum's financial statements, and kind of looked at and was comparing that this center manages to earn 2/3 of its operating income, and they did bring that up in their presentation to us, and I think that's really important to note because the Royal BC Museum does not. They earn 20% of their income. The other half of it comes from the province. $11 million comes from the province. So the fact that they're only asking, I mean, the population base that is supporting them at $140,000 a year compared to the population base that's supporting the BC Museum at $11 million is very different. So I'm in full agreement with Councillor Rintoul that we need to find this. Hopefully they will be able to leverage this money into staff that will write grants and hopefully get some of that off of the town of Sydney into another level of government. But the fact that they are requesting that level of money and need that level of support is not out of line with the type of service that they're offering as a museum rather than a private company, and I feel comfortable with that.
Thank you. Councillor Fallett.
Thank you. I'm in agreement with my colleagues at the table. I think Shaw Ocean has been a bit behind the 8 ball in the previous years, and it hasn't they haven't come to their development. They haven't been able to do what they should be doing. And I think they're in a better position now with both management and staff. And I would like to give them the opportunity to prove themselves. But they are going to have to prove themselves. This comes at a cost to our community. And I think it is the right thing to say, prove to our community that we've made the right decision, if that's how it turns out at the table. It is an important feature of our town. I wouldn't want to see it go. I think we're punching above our weight to have an aquarium. I have some thoughts about an aquarium as such. It is an expensive venture, but we've got it now, and I think we have to let this new management team be given the opportunity to prove that they can do what they've set out to do. Thank you.
Councillor O'Keefe.
So I'm in general agreement, I think, with my colleagues. So some of the issues for me is, yes, it's true that, museums and other cultural organizations, pay a similar sort of percentage of in terms of how they cover their revenue. So the thing for me is making sure that, not that we're just going to give them a percentage of money that is consistent with other cultural organizations, but that it's viable long-term. And so I think that's some of the concerns we have. I don't think there's a question about the educational value and the value the center has overall to the community. For me, it's about making sure that there's the projections that are put forward, I question a little bit in terms of future attendance and future retail revenue. I think they're optimistic. I hope they come through. But I think, like Councillor Rintoul has said, is that we want to see some sort of performance. That if this is the plan for the organization to be sustainable, I'm willing to, I know from having just recently become the liaison to the center about what a fantastic team they have there. An excellent executive director, some really knowledgeable and passionate people on their board. I'm very impressed. So despite, some reservations I have about projections for the future, I'm willing to agree with my colleagues to go along for at least a year and see if we can, if you can perform on those expectations that you've laid out.
Councillor Garnett.
There's a lot of agreement at the table. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind of the benefit to the community, both financial and from an educational component, which I think is actually the most important part of your facility. To be honest with you, this one cost me sleep. I struggled with this one a lot, based on reading the engineer's report. And it comes down to, like Councillor O'Keefe talked about, financial viability and the infrastructure's viability, given that it's wasn't built to be in that facility in the first place. And also I have issues like Barbara Fallett, Councillor Fallett, with an aquarium-based model. That's just my own personal take. I also agree that I think we should use some kind of performance metrics that Councillor Wainwright mentioned. And going forward, since your ask is so great after this year, I think I would also agree with Councillor Rintoul that you need to seek other funding sources, because it becomes a great ask over time for the taxpayers. And if for some reason that the viability doesn't sustain itself, the taxpayers will put a lot of money into it, and we have to answer for that. So I would really like to see that, coming next year even, that to see some significant effort at achieving some kind of other funding sources and not just being reliant on the town. But as Councillor O'Keefe said, I'm willing to approve it for this year, just to give you guys the chance to make that turnaround for yourselves, because you are a valuable part of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, fellow council members. My comments are to echo many of the comments already made, particularly with regards to the economic, educational and cultural benefits to the community. I'm in favor of providing the requested funding for 2019 and 2020. This is a multi-year request going on, request beyond 2 years. So I would suggest if we are considering a shorter term of support, that we make a motion to that effect. And I would also echo that Council has already spoken to the concern about providing that the 2020 level of funding on an ongoing basis well into the future, and would look for opportunities to pursue other funding. But one question I would like to seek clarification from Councillor Wainwright or others is with regards to performance metrics. For me, the success of the organization in terms of approaching, becoming cash flow neutral and being sustainable financially would be the number one metric for me. If we're considering imposing other performance metrics in the first 2 years, I think we need to state those at this time, because I think the organization needs to be aware of what the expectations are of council members. So I turn to Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because tonight is the budget meeting, I would prefer not to dive into the weeds and try to sort out what the appropriate metrics are. I certainly agree with what I'm hearing about the desire to have them find additional funding sources. But my proposal would be that we refer that particular discussion of what the metrics should be to a committee of the whole, which gives us a bit of time to think about it, takes it off the table tonight so that we don't waste time, wading into the weeds, because we seem to have a consensus of funding them conditionally for the next 2 years, and we could make a motion to that effect. Approve the funding conditionally for 2 years and refer the discussion of what appropriate metrics are to committee of the whole, and we should be able to give them that feedback within, say, 2 months at the outside, and I think that gives them the time to act on it. And we could, if council desires, we could even do it earlier at committee of the whole.
Okay, I guess I'll seek a further clarification in terms of, would these performance metrics be imposed in 2019 and 2020 such that the funding would change over those 2 years? If we pass a resolution supporting the funding level requested for 2019 and 2020, that's a commitment. If we're imposing conditions, what are the conditions imposing? I appreciate you may not want to get into the weeds, but I think we need to, in principle, suggest what the conditions would impose relative to financing or to grants. Go ahead, Councillor Wainwright.
I think the easy way of dealing with it is that the motion would be a maximum amount of funding over the 2-year period, because if they're successful, for example, in finding 40,000 of external funding, I would expect that to reduce the amount that we'd be giving them. And, again, not diving into the weeds, but whatever motion we happen to make tonight, we could reconsider next budget cycle anyway. So I don't see us being locked in. I mean, even if we had the financial plan show 5 years of funding, next year we could revisit that. So I'm simply not wanting to get hung up on the details, and especially where we seem to largely have a consensus, and move on to the next item, which I don't think we're going to have a consensus on.
Okay, thank you. Councillor O'Keefe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I'm thinking about when I'm talking about performance, I'm talking about, I guess, the bottom line. So a plan has been, a financial plan has been projected, saying the center projects revenue of X amount of dollars, retail of X amount of dollars, grants revenue of a certain amount, and that our 60,000 or whatever the amount is included in that. And so that they're projecting that at the end of the year that, I think there's a small, I can't see, but, you know, there'll be I guess I'm just asking them to live up to what their plan is. That's basically the metric that I'm talking about, is if they said they're gonna have this amount of revenue and they're gonna have this amount of expenses, they're gonna have grants from here, general donations, et cetera, then the bottom line is, you know, within a couple % of that, then I'm happy. I guess what, you know, my concern is about getting to my comments earlier about making sure that it's sustainable, so that I don't want us, you know, putting 60,000 in, and that at the end of the year, their revenue projections are lower, or because there's been some major piece of equipment, of infrastructure that needs to be replaced, that they're in a deficit again. And so basically, I want to just see that at the end of the year, it's going to be a sustainable operation financially.
Thank you. Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I concur with trying to eliminate any ambiguity, and I do like the suggestion of having some time to come up with, you know, maybe some more definitive suggestion to the center in terms of our expectations. But perhaps to address your observations, Mr. Mayor, and I like where Councillor Wainwright was headed, that we're approving up to $60,000 and up to $140,000 in the second year. With no reference beyond that point in time, knowing that they're coming back before council to look for further funding, and that we will use the criteria we established through committee of the whole meeting to evaluate 2021, for example. So I would be comfortable proceeding in that manner.
Councillor Duncan.
I would actually say that if we're going to go for 2 years, to not make it a maximum amount, just give them the amount, approve the amount, give them some breathing room. Like they got to be sweating knowing that they have to not only turn around their whole operation, but they also have to be able to find the funding. And then if they actually manage to get the funding, then we're going to cut their funding back again immediately within a year or two. And that seems cruel and unusual. We just, you know, be able to say, look, this is what you've got for 2 years. You can budget that amount. It's not going to be snatched back from you no matter what happens the next 2 years. Stuff happens, right? If something unforeseen can come up in a year, and then you can lose your funding, and after you've gone through the process of saying, here's a 10-year plan, and here's how we've got it all planned out, but then, oh, something unforeseen happened, and now we're going to shut you down after saying we were going to fund you for a little bit. I think that's just... that would make me sweat if I was them trying to plan for that contingency. So I feel like giving them that money and then saying, like, the metrics are, we need to see grant writing has happened. You've applied for these many grants. At least some of those have to be successful. I don't know if they'll be able to make that funding shortfall up in that first year or two. Like, it might take those 2 years to secure that grant. And like Councillor O'Keefe, I'm worried about those admissions, and that the idea that the top line growth is going to just go up 2% each year simply because people move here, that doesn't mean they have the discretionary income. So what I'm worried about is if we say, if you happen to make $40,000 more, that means we pull it back, that they're going to end up just going into the negative right away again anyway. So I do worry about making it contingent on they must meet numbers that we already suspect might be fictional. They have to make it start, you know, show that they're on the track to being able to be revenue neutral, but not immediate, not next year.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'll go to Councillor Fallop in just a moment, but I just want to make a comment. The board of the organization is responsible for the financial performance of the organization. They will tell us whether their organization is sustainable or not when we provide the funds. They will make the decision, as they're having to make now, whether to continue operations or whether to continue and seek additional funding. So I'm willing to have a motion that we provide funding subject to conditions, and we decide those conditions. But I think we will need to be careful at that time what we choose to impose on an arm's length organization. Councillor Fowler?
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what Councillor Duncan has just voiced. This organization has struggled for a variety of reasons. When they came before us, we put them to task, the last council put them to task and said, come up and let us know what's going on, do an assessment. That's been done. And they are here today with a plan. And I think it now behooves us, if we're seeming to sing out of the same hymn sheet, is to give them the breathing room to do what they've set out to do with time parameters. We've got 2 members of the board. We have the executive director sitting here in this room right now hearing from us. They have received questions from us over the last weeks. They've heard our comments. They've heard our concerns. I think these are all valid concerns that have been brought up by different members of the council. And I don't think they're going to walk out of this room thinking that they've got it made in the shade. They know that they're going to have to come up to snuff. And I think we need to give them that grace. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wainwright, then Councillor O'Keefe.
Again, I think that we really need to have some time to talk about this. And the 2 points that I'll make, one way they can make their financial look a lot better is jack up the admission fee dramatically. And they'll probably become quite a bit more profitable, and we'll probably have quite a lot less visitors coming to Sydney. And that actually is one of the big reasons to be funding them. So there's a balancing going on, and the metric should not be purely financial performance. And as far as the attracting external funding goes, if the message that's going out from the town is, for every dollar you bring in grants, we're going to reduce our operating contribution, what that means is you go looking for some corporation to put in 10,000, and they go, yeah, I give you this 10,000, and you just give it to the town, in effect. Like, you're fundraising for the town. And they're not going to get anyone giving them money like that. And I having, been involved with the museum, I remember the same kind of discussion. So the thing, we need to have a discussion, and I don't think tonight's the appropriate time, and work through that. But what I am hearing is a consensus that we're willing to see those dollars earmarked in the budget with some conditions.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. Just a couple things. I guess in regards to the notion that, there's a board for the organization, and it's up to them to make the decision whether it's viable or not. And I understand that. However, I think it's our responsibility as the stewards of the taxpayers' money to make sure that what we're funding is something that is going to be viable long term. And so that's why I think it's perfectly okay for us to say attach conditions to money. And I think it's something we might want to talk about with other community organizations that we provide money to. Having said that, I agree with the comments that, the organization needs some flexibility. So if we decide we're going to give them $60,000 this year, and they happen to get a $20,000 grant, I wasn't foreseeing clawing that back. I guess my view on it was that they would get their extra $60,000 for this year, and if they happen to exceed their expectations in terms of revenue and sales, that would carry into the next year. But I wasn't intending to punish them for exceeding the expectation. Just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Councillor Rintoul?
Sure, I can try and phrase a motion, and certainly happy to see it wordsmith. But I'll move that the Town of Sydney financial plan includes supplemental funding in 2019 for $60,000 and in 2020 for $140,000, with the understanding that performance metrics will be agreed for reporting purposes between the centre and the town.
I'll second that.
Discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Should we move on to the Sydney Business Improvement Association request?
That was the one. I find this one problematic, and I would support either cutting it entirely or recognizing that the SBIA was willing to put up $10,000 of cash purely for the sake of partnership. I could see myself being willing to match their $10,000, but not support the full 50. However, I'd be quite comfortable cutting the full 50. And I guess my rationale for that is that I don't think that I'm just not comfortable that what they're proposing to spend it on is the appropriate thing to be doing. I've definitely heard that there is some importance in trying to attract businesses to Sydney, but what I've been hearing is more that it's strategic types of businesses rather than just anybody coming in. And it seems that what they're proposing is in fact just shotgun type advertising attracting anyone. I don't know, I could go into it in a bit more depth, but I think I've simply put it on the table and see what my colleagues are thinking on this one.
Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel like we may create a void if we're to pass this up. Meaning, I do believe that the SBIA is a focal point for individuals, for businesses, for corporations looking to establish presence in Sydney. I think they're fulfilling a purpose, and I think it's probably a little early in terms of the reporting that we're seeing from the pilot project to be able to say that there's ammunition there to fully support this. So I understand there may be some reservations with respect to where we're at with the pilot and having feedback of results from that. But I'm supportive of this function being fulfilled because I don't think the town itself currently has the capacity, the structure to be able to carry out the work that's envisioned here. And so I'm a little more agreeable to supporting this request. However, I do see the need for council to be able to look at progress to date in the pilot, beyond sort of the update we've had on one occasion verbally with respect to where the pilot is at currently. And so I don't know if it's possible through the mayor to staff, but is there an option to place funds within the Economic Development Fund itself, earmarked or bookmarked for this purpose, if we were to receive enough information from the pilot to, in the minds of council collectively, to justify proceeding with this on a 1-year basis. So I'm seeing a thumbs up.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Keefe.
So, in regards to this proposal, I'm not in favor of any part of it staying in the budget, and for a number of reasons. As we heard in the presentation, there have been no performance metrics established for any part of the project. So in terms of waiting for the pilot to be finished and having some results from that, there was no metrics established, so I'm not sure that we would get that. The things that are proposed, in my opinion, are not value added to the community. The job posting website that they're proposed is a duplication of effort. There's numerous opportunities already for Sydney businesses to post jobs, so I don't think that's value added. A website to provide info to business owners on how to establish business here, that's already provided on the town's website. We could maybe do some tweaking there to make it a little bit more user-friendly, but I think that's part of a service that's already offered. The other things that are proposed, employee attraction and retention, in my opinion, I don't think that they're going to be successful in terms of an employee retention that offers, I think, a $100 gift card per month. I don't think that's going to have an impact. The window wrapping campaigns, I just don't think it's value added, and a lot of it is duplication of effort. What I'd be more inclined to do is, I think we do need to invest something in economic development, but what I'd be more inclined to do is to just put that into a general pot, and then once the review has been done on the terms of reference for the Economic Development Commission, and we've had time to have a broader discussion about what we think the town should be doing. There's some of these initiatives that I wonder whether, is it even really the town's role to get into some of these things, and whether these are things that businesses should be taking on. So generally, I think we need to have a larger discussion about economic development and our role in it. So I prefer to not put any money into that. If we want to put something aside, as I say, for economic development to be decided at later, I'd be more in favor of that.
Councillor Duncan and Councillor
I feel, fortunately for Councillor O'Keefe, we already have something set aside for economic development. It's the Economic Development Fund. So I am in agreement. I feel like they missed the mark on what the limitations were to work for people coming and working in the town, and what they would actually be able to provide. And a lot of the stuff, I remember the questions that were asked at the time, that it's not that we don't have people who want to live here, who want to work in our businesses. It's that they can't afford a place to live, and the SBIA can't do anything about that, no matter how much money we give them. I feel I am hoping also that when the review of the EDC comes through, that perhaps that would be one of their roles, is helping to figure out what we actually can do within that purview, and then deciding which organization of all of the many that are operating and that we are funding would be the ones that were best to carry that out. And the SBIA may very well be a great organization to carry out some of the things that will be identified then. But I think that what they've come with is not what's going to help. And I love the SBIA. I really enjoy the vision that they have for how the downtown will operate, and the mix of businesses and kind of the branding that they envision. So I'm kind of sad to say it, but yeah, I felt like this missed the mark for me too.
Councillor Fallon.
Thank you. The SBIA has done an incredible amount of work in the years since they've been established, and I think with Donna Petrie and Susan Samosko, we've been very fortunate with the work that they have done for us, for the town. The Sydney today is definitely much more vibrant, and they've been doing some great brainstorming. I think they missed the mark on this particular proposal, and for me it really comes down to their attraction in this proposal, wanting to attract more workers, and as we've just heard, it's getting them here isn't the biggest problem, it's keeping them here. And there's only so much that this proposal can do if the other part that's missing is affordability and availability of housing and transportation. And those are two very key elements that, I guess it's a chicken and egg thing, but I can't support this particular ask because there's an important element that doesn't click for me on the proposal. And I think if we're going to give them that sort of money, they've got to come back with a much different proposal. I can't support this one. I think we should have money available in our ED fund, but it's not going to be for this particular one. Thank you.
Councillor Garnett, or Councillor Garnett, yes.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with a lot of what's already been said. I'm not in favor of it as well. And the worker retention it stands out as a big one because I remember when they were doing their presentation, I kept thinking, from we heard of all these industry leaders in the community, the biggest problem they have is housing and transportation, and there's really nothing they can do about it. That's at so many different levels of government outside of their capacity. And there's a lot of duplication, like Councillor O'Keefe spoke to, that I see in there that I don't feel is a good use of resources. For me personally, I would, once we get the Economic Development Commission, their parameters set up and we get them selected, I would prefer to see some of that money set aside for some of their initiatives because I think that would benefit our community more. That's my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. My comments are, I'm in support of the funding request for the following reasons. First, to echo part of what Councillor Fallett said, the BIA that's been established a little over 6 years has been enormously successful as a governance model for business support. It's there are about 65 BIAs in the province, and it has had success. It collects a levy through to its business members of over $300,000 a year. Last night we heard at council from myself when we received the CIAG report that for a relatively small investment in a event liaison coordinator position, I think it's something in the area of $15,000 or $20,000, we have seen 18 community organizations to come together in the CIAG committee for several years and support current events, new events, that has made the town much, much more vibrant than it was before the BIA started. The BIA has approximately 375 business license members who pay the levy, and then there are the commercial property owners that are their landlords that are also members. And when we look at what the BIA has come forward with, they've certainly given consideration to what their members desire in terms of economic development or economic vibrancy. And in terms of workforce attraction, there is no question, I think, amongst our council and within the community that businesses of all description, whether they be in the downtown or the west side or the marine services on Harbour Road, are in need of and want employees. There's a shortage. You could do nothing and say, the cost of housing is the problem, and until that gets solved, you're not going to get more employees. Business tends not to do that. When they have a challenge, you need to try and address it in some fashion. And in this case, they have a workforce attraction program. In terms of setting up their own job posting site, the reason they've done that is because with the current job posting sites, they're not getting the employees that they need. And so they're taking action to bring in their own site. It's being used. Do you want to establish a metric in terms of how many employees were hired through the site? The cost of getting that metric is not reasonable. You can't say whether an employee decided to work for them because they saw the website or didn't see the website. So that's a challenge that the business community is having, and through the BIA, they've chosen that as a priority. In terms of business retention, that's important. Providing services to businesses to try and retain them is important, and equally important is business attraction. The business district that we have of 375 businesses downtown is unique as a business district, very unique as a business district in the Capital Regional District. If you go to Hillside Mall or Mayfair Mall or the Bay Center or Tillicum Mall or the big box, the main big box mall in Langford, they have one property owner. And that property owner can do all sorts of recruiting of business attraction for businesses. Hillside Mall over the just recently is going to take in the third Walmart location in Victoria into the former Sears space. They actively pursued filling that space, just as they actively pursued Canadian Tire to fill the space that Target vacated. We have a couple of dozen vacant spaces within the downtown by individual property owners. There's nobody acting on behalf of the business district to try and attract businesses into those vacancies. You know, we can say, is that a municipal role? Should we be supporting that in some fashion? Well, the BIA is an arm's-length organization that is raising funds to contribute to the effort, but they are asking for support. We've heard from Mr. Hissick tonight that commercial taxes are about $2.9 million. The downtown BIA, I requested this of Mr. Hissick earlier today, the downtown BIA pays about $1.9 million in taxes, in commercial business taxes. I think, and when you look at the community charter states, quote, one of the purposes of a municipality is fostering the economic, social, and environmental well-being of its community. We're talking about support in a general sense. We're not talking about supporting individual businesses, which is not permitted within the charter. So that's how I feel. I feel we need to, when you have a challenge, you need to try something. And I think that the BIA's initiatives are reasonable, and I would encourage my fellow council members to perhaps reconsider. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did say when I kind of introduced this that I wasn't going to really speak to my reasons and let others. So I think one of the things we all recognize is that somebody ought to be responding to requests from businesses that are interested in locating in Sydney. And the question of where that goes, I can see the town actually supporting that particular function, but that is a very defined function, and it's kind of nebulously somewhere in this funding request. I would much prefer to see us get our act together and say, here are the things we're looking for, that we're interested in funding. I can see that some value in an economic development advisory group comparable to the CIAG thing. It could be an evolution of what used to be the Economic Development Commission. I think it's important that it represents all the sectors, you know, including the marine one and such, and it shouldn't be overbalanced by any one particular sector. That would be an important thing. And the objective, in fact, would be to foster the communication between them, which is kind of what CIAG's doing, and also provide a vehicle for council to ask for advice. But we're still in the throes of figuring out what the terms of reference for that should be. My big concern, and I'm echoing some of the thoughts from my colleagues, I can see us having money earmarked for economic development. I can't see at this stage saying, yes, this is the right place to put it, because we haven't actually figured out what our objectives are. And I would agree completely that we're hearing across the board from all our sectors that they're having trouble attracting employees. But from the marine side and the West Sydney Industrial, they're particularly expressing concerns about skilled trades, not simply warm bodies. And I appreciate there are a lot of challenges with that. In fact, I was just hearing this morning about a relative of a colleague who works in construction for Napa, and had been working in Colwood, and they've reassigned the individual to a NAPIT project in Sydney. and the individual decided to take a layoff instead of doing that because getting to Sydney from Souk is a 2-hour commute. There, 2 hours getting there, 2 hours back, way too expensive, just not worth it. Would rather be laid off. So there are definitely issues, and I don't have the solutions, but clearly we have to be strategic in where we invest our money. And I think that really being the big concern, that what we've got actually is we've had a few different groups come forward with ad hoc proposals of here's a good place to put your money, and we don't have that overview of what are we trying to accomplish, what are our priorities. So I'm just not prepared to support that until we've done that. And if we put money into our if we continue to have an economic development fund, we have the opportunity to get our act together, and then there'll be funds there to support it. But to just jump in and go, this is the right place to put the money without actually having come up with any kind of economic prosperity strategy, I don't think is the right thing for us.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. So another thing with this proposal is that we haven't had the opportunity yet to consult the rest of the business community to see if it's something that's going to meet their needs. So I think we need to, as Councillor Wainwright says, have some sort of strategy to decide where we want to go and what we want to do. And, we've heard from the other sectors of the community on the west side and Harbour Road that they're feeling a little left out. There's some business owners within the SBIA that feel left out, that their needs as service industries are not being addressed. So I think, we still haven't had a chance to review the terms of reference for the Economic Development Commission. That body is the body that would bring those different diverse groups together. So what I'd like to see is that we, once we get through the terms of reference for the EDC, to be able to bring those groups together and let them have the opportunity to comment, to identify what they think would help move things ahead in terms of economic development. And then once that's decided, maybe it'll be the SBIA, maybe it won't, but with a significant chunk of money at $50,000, I'd like to see that go out for tender anyways, for bids. That, the SBIA has had some success in other areas, but if the EDC comes along and says, we think it would be good to fund a $10,000 or $20,000 project on something, I don't think that it's a given that we automatically hand that to the BIA. I think to make sure we get the best bang for our buck, that we get the most knowledgeable people on whatever it is, whether it's a study or a survey or a website, that we get the most appropriate people there. So I'm in favor of just letting that money perhaps sit in a fund and decide what to do with that after we've had a more fulsome discussion.
Councillor Rintoul?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I beg your pardon. I concur. It would be, it's important, and we've embarked on the process of reviewing the EDC and coming up with some strategies around what's next for the EDC and some direction. My fear with this, I think, as I noted last time I spoke, was around we may be creating a void if we don't address this. I'm fearful that we take the time to go through the EDC process, which is important, create that communication vehicle, which I hope that it can be. But I also think the items identified in here are a piece of the puzzle. But more importantly, as the liaison to the SBI from Council, I do feel that there's a real passion around that table for pursuing these economic development initiatives, and I fear that we'll be without, again, a place for business to turn. when they're looking at establishing a presence in the town. And so I suggested initially I'd like to see the feedback from the pilot. I think it's important we see those results and where it's at. But I'm still very comfortable earmarking this money within the Economic Development Fund, for the SBI and this purpose. But if council would like to see whether or not there's broader interest in taking that on, then certainly to earmark the funds for this purpose would be important to me. And I reiterate that I think the SBIA is a credible, passionate entity in which to fulfill this task.
Thank you. If I could, Councillor Duncan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. So I know we've talked about the valuable things that they're doing, and it kind of falls under things we've already got funding for them for, though. I guess the issue is it's the additional 50,000, right, that we're having the questions about. We won't be cutting the pilot funding. That continues in 2019. Nobody was proposing to cut the remainder of the pilot, and I don't think anyone was proposing to cut the event liaison, which has also been wonderful, or the event supplement. So I feel like the stuff that they already do, that they do really well and that's really valuable, isn't a threat. What I'm wondering, and I've been kind of going through my notes going like, did I take bad notes? I guess I did, because I'm just looking at what was when they presented January 28th, the council, the requests are 50,000. Deliverables will include a range of projects in the following 4 categories: business attraction, business retention, workforce attraction, creation of dedicated economic development website, and supporting assets. That's it. That's the detail I have. And that's the part that gets me. If it was a little more broken down and I could say, okay, this piece, like maybe the window wraps, I seem to remember them saying that was quite reasonable. And if the businesses downtown, I've been very pleased with that, and being able to say, okay, we can keep the window wraps. That was only going to be $8,000 or something like that. Or, this it turns out having an additional funding for Donna to continue answering the phones, because they found that to be very useful, and we could continue doing that. That might be the thing, but getting the phone calls from people wanting to set them in town, but just kind of looking at it going, so how much, what exactly of that 50 grand goes to each of those things, I think is the part that I'm struggling with. So if somebody else took perhaps better notes than me and has a better idea of if there's some, if we don't have to cut all of it or approve all of it, if we can come up and say, look, these are the parts that, Councillor Rintoul and the mayor feel are very important and are in addition to the stuff we know that they already do that are really good, that we would like to fund, then I might be agreeable to approving a lesser amount than the full 50,000. But that's the part that I'm struggling with. If you got it.
Thank you. I'll try and be brief in some remarks along a slightly different line, and that is with regards to the suggestion that, as in the past, council at this time of year, at this time during budget deliberations, sets aside an amount which it puts in the Economic Development Fund, and then it can be accessed through the year by individuals, organizations coming forward with an idea and council approving it. We're faced tonight with requests for economic support from 3 organizations: from the Sydney BIA, which is Sydney-based, from the Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, which is Peninsula-based, and from South Island Prosperity Partnership, which is Capital Regional based. Their initiatives are different. There has been some criticism that there is some minor overlap. I would say that is extremely minor and could actually be worked out between the groups to become more complementary. The question I have to ask is that these 3 organizations, which have had considerable experience in each of their areas, have come forward with what they determine to be priorities on behalf of the stakeholders that they represent. And we're requesting more information, not sure if it's the right thing. And we're considering an alternative to go ahead and set this money aside in an economic development fund and then put it together an ad hoc group of representatives from these same organizations and citizen representatives who may have tremendous business experience, and they're going to come up with economic development initiatives that are more focused, better, higher priority, than what these three organizations that already have experience in what they're doing. I question that. I think these organizations have good reputations, and I think we should accept what they've brought forward as priorities, and to think that we're going to be able to put some group together that can come up with better ideas, and who's going to execute these ideas once this new EDC commission comes up with. Previous council already wrung its hands for 4 years on whether to establish an ED function within the town of Sydney, which was estimated to cost between $150,000 and $200,000 a year. So those are our options, and I will, if there's any further discussion, then look for a motion. Councillor O'Keefe.
So I'll just make a comment in terms of, in regards to that, the SBIA is an organization that has put forward this plan. They're very knowledgeable. They've consulted. This is based on the stakeholders they represent. And so for me, that's kind of a clincher, because the stakeholders they currently represent are within the downtown area. So it's not covering like the west side, and it's not covering the harbor. So those are kind of issues for me. And so what I envision with the EDC, they seem to, they got some good things done pulling those groups together. So for me, that's the missing piece with the BIA, is that I don't see that they're representative of the whole organization.
Councillor Wainwright?
I'll move that we cut the SBIA funding of $50,000 this year and the $65,000 for future years.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? I'll call a question. All those in favor? We have 5 in favor and those opposed. And we have 2 opposed. Thank you for the deliberations. We'll now move on to the third, which is the Chamber of Commerce Economic Development request for $20,000 for 2019. Councillor Wainwright?
Okay, I'm not going to make a motion because it's already in the financial plan. While I might have some concerns, my understanding is that there's been discussion of the 3 mayors on this particular project, and if the 3 municipalities collectively are, actually, I shouldn't say, the other way around, if North Saanich and Central Saanich are prepared to support this, I'm in favor of some regional peninsula collaboration, and for 20,000, I'm willing to give it a chance. So this one, I'm prepared to let it go through.
Councillor Rintoul?
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that this is a joint municipal funding proposal, and I take it by its nature then that if each of the 3 municipalities don't contribute equally, then it's not going to happen. And I trust that if there were to be a motion, that it would read as such, so that if either North Saanich or Central Saanich elect not to participate, or at a lesser amount, that our contribution would be adjusted accordingly. Having said that, we just talked about the SBIA's initiative, failing to address the issue of affordable housing or the availability of public transportation. Truly initiatives and concerns for the entire peninsula. Where I like the collaborative approach as well, clearly. This is to hire an individual to put together some courses and an industry tour. We already do an industry tour. The Chamber already puts on courses. I'm a supporter of their efforts. It's a member organization. The municipalities and how they support it, I think, need to be very selective. And if they were tackling some of those broader issues that the Chamber themselves acknowledge are very important to the peninsula and to their membership, I think I would have been a lot more receptive to this, as opposed to putting on some courses that may benefit their members or may, benefit those who choose to pay to go to those workshops. So those are my concerns with it. I'm certainly prepared to be flexible on that position. But I think it's positive in the sense that there's collaboration. Where it's weak is, in my mind, what it targeted to address. Thank you.
If I could just make a remarks on clarification with regards to the three municipalities. While the three mayors did meet, and we did meet with the executive director of the chamber and a board member, we did not intend to fetter each other's councils in terms of a decision. So I don't think the funding a resolution could be contingent on other municipalities. If all three municipalities made resolutions contingent, it doesn't move forward. And I can't speak to specifically whether the other two municipalities have or will approve. I think we have to approve on the merits. I think whether they receive 20,000, 40,000, or 60,000, given the types of initiatives that they're proposing, they would be able to scale those appropriately to the funding that they receive. So I just wanted to make that note of clarification. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. I had the opposite impression that Councillor Rintoul did when I looked at the deliverables. I thought, oh yeah, this actually jives with what I thought that they'd actually hit it. And oh yeah, this actually seems to jive with what I was hearing the gaps are. So it's interesting. In particular, I know that they already do an industry tour. But that it was an additional tour of specifically the marine groups. And the home-based business workshop, for my perspective, that was something that nobody had done yet, and that I'm not sure. I believe there's about 100 home-based businesses. It's not growing, but just knowing my generation, anyone who owns a business, just about everyone I know who owns a business, who is my age, has a home-based business, specifically because they can't afford to have a downtown-based business. So I feel like for the small amount of money that they're actually looking at and actually going out to talk to those businesses, it's actually capturing the entire demographic of those people that, the SBA is saying one of their big problems is they don't have a succession plan. They're all aging out and there's nobody to sell their businesses to take over their businesses. And that's where they are. They're working at home because they don't have the capital to take over their business. And so I feel that one in particular, for such a small amount and such something that nobody has talked about before, I would really like to see where they go with that and what they might find, because we might actually be able to get some of those businesses out of their homes if they actually, maybe we'll hear that they want to get out of their homes and they can work together later to figure out how to get them, into a storefront. So for my perspective, that would be a good one.
Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree that with Councillor Duncan in regards to the things that I really liked were the home office workshop for the reasons you outlined, and also the local the career education fair. I thought that was a really good thing, targeting youth especially and getting them exposure to some of the industries that we have in our community. So I thought those were great initiatives, so I would support that. The industry tour, they do one. I guess what I understood from this, it would be something a bit different to focus on some of our industries here. So for $20,000, I thought I could support that.
Councillor Garnett.
Yeah, originally I was of the mindset of Councillor Rintoul, but hearing Councillor Duncan, I actually never thought of that perspective, and that's why it's great to have so many different minds on council. Your point is extremely well taken, so you're kind of shifting my opinion on that based on that alone, because that is very important, and your demographic gets overlooked way too much, so thanks.
Councillor Enright.
I'm just going to suggest, if nobody wants to make a motion to cut it, that we simply move on to the next item.
I would just like to make the comment that here's one of the three business organizations has determined priorities. We happen to see merit in these particular economic development initiatives and didn't see merit in others. And I do support this. I think the addition of industry tours in different business sectors, other than what they've done, is helpful, and again, addressing home-based businesses. So again, if there's consensus, nobody wishes to make a motion. Councillor Rintoul?
Yeah, I won't make a motion because I think there's consensus, contrary to my opinion. I just, again, I'll just reiterate, it's a membership-driven organization. For people in the home business, they can go to any chamber event now. They just pay a fee, as do members. There's no difference here in my mind. We're just contributing, maybe on our own or maybe with the other municipalities, to try and hire someone to put this together on behalf of their members, it appears to me. So I had concerns with it. Having said that, I feel there's consensus around supporting it, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, having reading a consensus, we'll move on to the next, and that would be the Artsy annual funding request for $20,000. And that is a one-time request for 2019, as I understand.
No, it's an ongoing increase.
Oh, is it ongoing? Okay. Okay. In the report, it just said 219, but I know you were in discussions with them, so. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't support the giving them an additional 20. In fact, we had just increased their funding significantly before, and I recognize that some of the things that were in their request, particularly their issues with their computer technology, it's reasonable to give them some support, but it's a difficult budget year, and I just can't see my way clear to giving them the full 20 they're asking. I would propose to reduce it by 5,000. And perhaps others are thinking of a larger number. By 5,000. So instead of a 20,000 increase, only giving them 15.
Councillor Fellett and Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I looked at Artsy's presentation, and they're asking for the increased funding. So they went from the previous, last year they got 15,000, and prior to that it was 4,500. So that was quite a big jump. But given how much we're spending on art, it's not a big amount. Now, from the 15,000, they're asking for 20 on top of that, bringing it to 35,000. Now, they said increased funding will be directed towards strengthening organizational and leadership capacity to support more effective core program delivery, more stable and sustainable operations, and improving services to membership, volunteers, and stakeholders. Improving communications and continued grants to member groups. So, of course, one thing that's hitting them for 2019 is the town of Sydney is no longer funding the CRD Arts. And so that is going to impact some of their member groups and themselves who have applied to the CRD Arts for grants, which they won't be eligible for. Where I run into some difficulty with their ask is they say on the one hand that they've hired a communications employee, and it's calculated in with their budget for this year. On the other hand, they're saying they're asking for this money to pay for this person. So there's a little bit of lack of clarity on exactly how they need this, what they need this money for. I'm prepared to increase their funding. I don't think to the tune of 20,000. I would, so from their 15,000 that they're currently getting, I would be prepared to add 10,000 to it.
Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm not so generous, or not inclined to be. So what I'm looking at with Artsy is, like you say, they got a $15,000 increase last year, up from 4,500. So that's significant. When I looked at their financial statements for their annual report, They were flush, they're doing fine, so they're not in a deficit. It's not like in the Shaw Center situation where they have, you know, extraneous circumstances and infrastructure to look out for. So financially, they seem to be doing okay. And the other thing, I guess, is what I heard in the presentation is that what they want the money for is to hire somebody to do the work of the society, because people in their organization, their members aren't stepping up to get some of the work done. So they're having trouble attracting board members and having trouble getting people to do the work. So they want to hire somebody to do all this stuff. And as I said that night, well, I can appreciate that that's a common problem in all community organizations. I don't feel right about the taxpayers having to fund that because members within their own organization aren't willing to step up and support their own organization. If this was a situation where they had asked us that because the CRD funding is no longer available, we want this money so we can hand that out to community groups, I might take a different view of it. But based on what they've presented, it's merely to, aside from maybe getting some computers, I might give them maybe $3,000 for that. But in terms of hiring somebody to do the work, I'm not, I can't support that. That's good for me, thanks.
Just before Councillor Rintoul, Councillor Fallot has a quick follow-up for Councillor O'Keefe.
In their application, they did say to continue grants to member groups and fill gap from loss of CRD funding.
So, I guess what I'd like to know is what the amount is. Because I got the sense from their presentation that the bulk of that was going to go towards the funded position. So if it was going to be to fund, to provide some funds, I would attach some strings to that. Because I'd be afraid of saying, yep, here you go. And then they go and they use it just to fund a position. And then the community groups that are part of ARTC don't benefit from that.
Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you. I actually came into this to staff with the frame of mind that this was sort of a one-time for 2019 increase. I got that based on their presentation and the report we received at the time around the request for an increased funding level reflects the focus on achieving key strategic priorities in 2019. And it refers to a total budget request for 2019. And so I actually felt this was more one-off in nature. Perhaps it differs within the report itself and the binder. Having said that, I think where Councillor Fallot landed around the $10,000 increase. I'm a little concerned as well that, you know, this is a position they're proposing for a board member, but I like the idea of assisting them with hardware and giving them some grant capacity in the context of having lost some of the grant that they acknowledged they'd received previously or their members had received through the CRD Arts program. Thank you.
Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. I can answer Councillor O'Keefe's question. I did take notes on that.
Okay.
The CRD grant in the past, they received $3,500. And yes, it is an ongoing request. I feel like maybe I'd give them $5. That makes their CRD. Then they get their CRD grant, and they get a little extra for their other miscellaneous things. But I agree that the idea of having to hire a person if they can't get their volunteers. All our organizations do have that problem, and I can't really justify it in this kind of tax year, especially if it's going to be ongoing. So,
Councillor Garnett.
I'm of the thinking along with Councillor Fallot and Councillor Rintoul, $10,000 was the kind of number that I settled on. I understand what you guys are saying about volunteers and whatnot, but it strikes a chord with me because I know that the arts in not just our community, but our country took a real beating under former federal governments. So I'm hesitant to leave them short, knowing that for so long they didn't get the funding they required, and needed. And arts are an extremely important part of our, not just our community, but our country makeup. And so I want to give them something for sure. And 10,000 was a number that I settled on in my head.
Second.
Councillor O'Keefe?
So I absolutely support the arts, but here's what I'm afraid of. I would rather, what they made reference to in their proposal, and I think maybe in their conversations with Councillor Fallett, they made reference to the fact that they might at some point in the future come forward to council with a proposal to administer those funds that used to go to the CRD. And they haven't yet done that. I don't know whether they will. So what I'd rather be doing is, unless we earmark that extra 5,000 that you want to give them, to say that it absolutely has to go to community groups. That's, I think, the only way that I could support it, because I'm just afraid that it's gonna end up in the administration of things. 10,000 is gonna be lost with administrative, with this additional person, and that those things that you're concerned about, and I think we're all concerned about supporting the arts, is it will get lost. And that money won't make its way out to the community groups. It'll get tied up and used up in office administration.
If I might weigh in for a moment. In general, I think the community through council woefully underfunds the arts in Sydney, on the peninsula, and in Greater Victoria. Having said that, the history with the Artsy is in 2017. We provided a grant of $4,500 with no strings attached to Artsy. In 2018, the council of the day increased that by $10,500 for a total of $15,000, and there was no strings attached to what the funding went towards. And so we have the request for an additional $20,000 this year. Council members might recall that during the presentation I brought up the subject of the sculpture walk, and whether there was an appetite or Artsy had considered the sculpture walk given their experience with artists and with art. And subsequent to that meeting, Councillor Fallett, who is liaison to the Arts Council, Mr. Humble, and myself met with their chair, Diane Thorpe, and a board member, just to explore a little further how receptive they were to considering becoming the administrators for the sculpture walk. Council might also recall that in 2018, Council approved $10,000 to the BIA to do, was it 2018? To do a study of the sculpture walk and what might be the future. The reason being is that we do not have the resources on staff to manage the sculpture walk. There was nothing conclusive other than finding a champion or an organization from the BIA report back. So we took the initiative, we met with them. To summarize, they do have an appetite to consider becoming the administrators for the sculpture walk. We didn't discuss the $20,000 request. We didn't discuss what portion of the $20,000 or any additional amount that we might allocate to the administering. I wanted to bring that forward to council for consideration. My thought is, given that we have given a $10,000 increase last year for general purposes, that we give a $10,000 grant for additional general purposes this year, and that we set aside $3,000 in a fund subject to or conditional on the town and the Arts Council coming to an agreement on them becoming administrators of the sculpture walk. So in essence, we'd be perhaps passing two resolutions. One would be for $10,000, whatever we deem the appropriate amount, and the second, if we're in favor of making that $3,000 allocation. I'll make one other comment with regards to funding. Within the annual report and comments they made, they did apply directly to CRD Arts last year and received $3,500 for the for the Sailor Sea Lantern Festival. They won't be able to apply for that this year, given that we're not members. 3 of their members that they provide grants to also received grants from CRD Arts last year. So those organizations, locally based, received grants from both CRD and Arts Council, and now they won't receive the CRD, so they anticipate receiving higher grant requests because of the loss of CRD funding. We could consider apportioning, if we went to a total of $25,000 of support, that is the current 15 plus 10, apportioning a portion of that for them to allocate to re-granting, which is a term that CRD Arts uses. However, at this time, I would not know, even though I believe they had it was somewhere between 8 and 12 grants applications that they awarded grants to last year. Councillor Fallot may know better as the liaison. Without knowing the specific amount that they actually granted out to organizations or what their budget for that would be this year, I'd hesitate until we had further discussion on actually putting that condition or limitation on our funding. Councillor Fallot?
Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. I would like to see our council have a discussion later on the year regarding our arts funding in general, and I think that's an important discussion for us to pursue. And at this point, I would then make the motion that we fund Artsy with $10,000 for general account, and $3,000 to fund to maintaining managing the sculpture walk.
I'll second that.
Okay, sorry if I could just interject for a moment. I think the second part of the motion needs to be conditional, so I might consider it as a second motion, or perhaps staff, a comment from staff. Mr. Hisik?
Separate motions would be fine, but we get the gist. I think it can be conveyed in one motion. So the 10,000 is general fund, and 3,000 to be withheld, conditional on agreement on sculpture walk. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And do we have a seconder?
Thank you. Yep.
Randy?
If I
Sorry,
can,
Mr. Humble?
if I can, Mr. Mayor, so we already do have a motion on the table, I
Mhm.
believe, made by Councillor Garnett and seconded by Councillor Wainwright for the
Mhm.
10,000.
That's right.
It was
Yeah.
informal, but it
Oh, I'm
was.
sorry.
it was-
Okay.
Yes.
It was
Yeah.
very informal, so I'm happy to,
I like that one better.
Okay, in terms of, sorry, in procedure, how should we proceed? Withdraw the first motion?
in procedure, the first one didn't start with I move, so
That's right.
the
Okay,
comment
all right.
second was simply
Okay,
a comment.
thanks for the clarification, thanks for the clarification.
I was just commenting, I didn't make.
Okay, do we have discussion on the motion currently on the floor?
I guess I'll just, so you're saying 10,000, no strings attached. They can go and hire somebody and spend it on whatever administration they want. No guarantee that it's gonna go to community groups then.
Sorry, if I could interject.
Yeah.
Knowing the organization and knowing the chair, the spirit of the organization and the passion of the organization is to support other arts groups in the community. So they want to commit, continue that support to the other groups. Yes, they want to make their administration more effective and more efficient. But I think again, unless we find out what amount they are granting out or intending to grant out, to try and put that condition, I think we could have that conversation at a later date.
And is this for 1 year or for ongoing?
I took it as ongoing, given that the request was ongoing, but I'll seek clarification.
Well, I think for myself, I think it is ongoing because I believe we do need to fund the arts. So this is ongoing. They also have a board meeting on Thursday, which I shall be attending, so I will certainly be taking council's comments back to them on Thursday.
Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for the deliberation on that. And I think we have, it's all encompassed in one. So we do have an addition, Councillor Wainwright?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to talk about the South Island Prosperity Project, and I've actually, I've had some previous conversation with the mayor, and he's pointed out that this, that they are significantly looking at making efforts towards the transportation issues that we were speaking about earlier. I do have some major concerns about performance metrics that they previously promised to address and didn't. But I am generally supportive of the idea of the region trying to address the transportation issues, and they have the potential of leveraging quite a bit of funding. I am prepared to see that one funded for 1 year only, subject to them actually demonstrating some metrics.
Further comment? Councillor Duncan.
I'm prepared to go for the next 2 years simply to finish that 5-year that they have in their plan, because I really would like to see that transportation plan, and I would hate for them to come back in year 5 and say, well, we weren't able to get all of the metrics that you wanted because we expected the funding or something like that. And we've kind of got it in there. When they initially came and requested the funding, like, this is what they laid out, and this is what they've been coming back, each year saying, and these are the amounts you're going to have. So I'm okay with saying, okay, finish that 5-year, get that federal funding, maybe, hopefully, for their Smart Cities Challenge, and then, hope that they're able to deliver at the end of that 5-year funding for the additional 2 years. So.
Councillor O'Keefe.
So I like the idea that they're a regional organization, and I think there's a lot of benefits to that. However, I have been frustrated that I've attended 4 presentations and every single one of them I've asked, so, how are Sydney businesses participating in there? How are we benefiting from this? And so far, I don't see that we are. And I, note Councillor Wainwright's comments about that there were some metrics that they were supposed to have provided and they haven't. And I believe the CEO says that those should be available in a few months. The pilot that they're applying for the smart cities and transportation, they should find out about that this year. So I think perhaps maybe another reason that we haven't got as much out of SIP as we could have is I don't know how proactive council was in terms of being on their radar and making sure that our needs were being brought to the table and addressed. So despite some reservations, I think there's some potential there, and I'd be willing to go ahead for 1 more year to see what they can do, and that they can have those metrics, and we can find out whether they are successful in getting that pilot project or not.
Councillor Wintoul.
Yeah, thank you. I must confess it to me it almost feels like money going into a black hole because of the lack of metrics and what's tangible in here. They're in this Smart Cities Canada Challenge. Obviously, there's some other items here. I feel like there's some consensus around the table, but I can't see this evening looking to confirm anything beyond the next year. And frankly, I would have been just as happy if we had a serious discussion about stepping away from our involvement in SIP. Thank you.
Councillor Garnett.
A lot of reiteration of comments. Yeah, I totally agree with Councillor Rintoul. I would have been okay with saying no too, but I do want to see the metrics, and because I read the original presentation, and that was one thing that was lacking. And I understand the person running it now is new and wasn't there at the time, but you're coming to council with requests for some funding. It would have been nice to have something to see if it is actually benefiting our community. And I don't know about whether that's going into a black hole or not. But and as far as the transportation part of it, I'd like to see what happens with that. And I certainly hope we aren't going to be shortened on it, because I know Victoria and Langford are going to get priority probably, and if they do win that. So it'd be interesting to see if it does happen, if we get our lion's share of what we need out here. So I guess I'd be willing to go with 1 more year just to see the metrics, if nothing else.
Councillor Fallon.
I remember the first meeting, and I forget the name that SIP was in the beginning, and it made a whole lot of sense to me for the region to work together to bring up the profile and to address the needs. And I think that pulling together as a region makes a whole lot more sense than each of us trying to do something on our own. I am disappointed that they didn't come with some numbers for us this time around and show us where they are for us. I'm willing to support them for another year and have a reassessment next year this time.
My comments, just building on earlier in terms of, having different business organizations, whether it's the BIA locally, the Chamber Peninsula-based, or SIP region-wide. Greater Victoria is unique, apart from the Lower Mainland, from the rest of most of Canada in terms of having 13 municipalities for a population of just under 400,000. And earlier tonight we had quite the deliberation in terms of economic development initiatives that may be good or not so good for our local community by a local organization. If you can imagine that going on in 13 municipalities across the region, you start to wonder what can be accomplished on a regional basis. One of the things that SIP is, as the representative to SIP and having attended 3 meetings, sitting on the Partners Committee, the situation as they've researched and would probably be obvious to most businesses is that businesses do business across the region. While a business may be set up in Sydney and do business with customers in Sydney, they may have suppliers throughout the region for other businesses. So they rely on the health of the economy regionally. Us as individual citizens don't spend all of our disposable income in Sydney. We support other economic institutions and businesses across the region. Employees travel across multiple boundaries every day to and from work. And so a regional initiative, I think, is imperative. And certainly the mayors that are sitting, the 10 mayors currently, or the mayors currently sitting on the Partners Council, very much feel that the collaboration and synergy is worthwhile. In the report that was provided to us in the latter pages, there was key highlights. I know there's been comments with regards to metrics, but apart from the Smart Cities Challenge, which is a $10 million application that they have before the federal government, and a 1 in 10 chance in winning, they did outline a number of other initiatives that they've done. So they've had their Open Initiative Innovation Challenge, where they had the competition for the best and brightest local innovators, and they're doing that again this year. They've created the Smouth-Sard Island Vision 2040 document, which is really talking about what our economy can look like in the long term. They have a very strong First Nations focus. They have 7 out of the 10 First Nations on the South Island are members of SIP. They have what is called Indigenous Connect, where they work out of the Songhees Innovation Center, which they helped raise funds for, to connect on a peer-to-peer forum to promote entrepreneurship, and First Nations throughout the South Island can participate in that. They have come up with the South Island Prosperity Index, which was partially presented to us, but is in a document. They launched that last year. They'll be launching the 2018 version in March. It's a national index that the 27 cities, largest cities across the country, use to look at metrics and how the region is performing, both economically and culturally. They have a business investment and attraction. They spoke about 2 companies that they have attracted to the area, and they also have a Business Connect service that they spoke to, and they gave examples such as Seasider and Central Saanich that has participated in their mentorship and advisory services. So they are an organization that are doing things, and I think I would support a motion to continue funding them for 2 years, but I will look for a motion.
I'll move that we continue funding them for 1 year.
Further discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Mr. Hisek.
You thought you were done with ED, but we're not. Let's finish it up so that we can decide what the true impact is going to be on our taxes. So by not approving the BIA request, we are left with $37,000, $185 in our traditional balance of the ED fund. Would you wish to keep it at that level pending the completion of the review of the EDC as well as potential applications that might come forward? Or would you prefer to reduce that further?
So just for clarification, Mr. Hisek, that 37,185, if we did leave it in an economic development fund, then our tax increase would remain at 4.3.
It would be reduced by approximately $12,000 based on the...
Oh, there was a differential of...
Yeah, so based on the BIA not being approved and us not needing to expand the existing funding.
Sorry, if we left the 37,185 in an EDC fund, ED fund, it would bring the tax increase to about
4.1,
4.1.
4.2.
Okay. Councillor Wainwright.
I would propose that we leave the funds there so they're available for whatever comes out of the review of the Economic Development Commission.
Second.
I don't think we need a motion if we're not actually making a cut.
Councillor O'Keefe.
So I guess I'm wondering, are the other things available for discussion? So I guess I'm thinking about the 22,500 for the pilot. If we're not funding the project, is that something?
We have commitments on the
Oh, we
rest of
do.
it through
Yep.
agreements.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay, so those other things, the event liaison and supplement, those are things that we're committed to? Oh, okay. So basically, we've got $37,000 sort of free floating, unallocated. Okay. I just had to understand that.
Any other councillor comments? Personally, I'm not in favor of carrying it forward in an ED fund and letting it reduce the tax increase further. But I would go with if there is a consensus on council. Councillor Duncan and Councillor Garnett.
I concur. I feel since we went and really axed the SBIA there that if we're not going to get a tax benefit out of it, just seems a little vicious. So I feel like maybe if we could get it down to, we usually have 100,000 in the ED fund. If we just bring it down to, with the carry forward from last year and what we've managed to save now, just bring it to, we're neutral at the end. We're not carrying forward that 37,000. And it's as though we had base funding of 100,000 available again.
Councillor Garnett, then Councillor Wainwright, then Councillor O'Keefe.
Well, I had come in here tonight with the that thought of taking some of that out of there to put on the tax, and my thought was possibly leaving the 7,185 in there for any EDC commitments or things that might come forward, and taking 30,000 towards the tax as a compromise. That's
Councillor Wainwright.
We talked earlier about some of the things that were potentially worthwhile doing, and one of them was some funding so somebody could be responding to requests from businesses interested in locating in Sydney. And if we have zero in the Economic Development Fund, we have no ability to fund that at all, or any other economic initiative.
But just for clarification, we turned that request down for funding in the BIA request.
I understand that. The BIA request did not actually earmark any specific funds for that purpose.
But it stated that it was a purpose.
And
Okay, Councillor O'Keefe?
So I guess I'm inclined to leave something in there for a couple reasons. So I'm reflecting on Mr. Hissick's comments earlier in the evening when he pointed out the amount of revenue that we get from the business community. And so I feel that it's reasonable to have something in there to give us some flexibility to address some of the concerns that they have. So my concern by cutting that out completely is that we have no flexibility to do anything as I see it. Everything else is committed to SBIA, gets a good chunk of it. There's a bit for the chamber, but we have no flexibility to do anything for our business community. If I'm understanding this correctly.
And just a clarification, we don't do that for any other aspect. Arts and culture, infrastructure, we're making our budgeting decisions. Councillor Duncan?
I might be reading it incorrectly, but would we not still have the $57,000 of unallocated funding unallocated if we took that 37,185? Huh?
No, we're
No?
down
Okay.
to 37,180.
Oh, so that's
Yeah.
so that's being subtracted out of it. I get you. Okay.
May I suggest leaving at least half of it for future decisions?
Councillor Rentoul?
Yeah, I appreciate the spirit of, the comments around trying to get use some of these funds against our tax position. If we were further along the discussion with respect to the EDC and where we may go with the EDC in light of not funding the SBIA and some of those functions that certainly I felt were important, I do like the idea of having some funds set aside. I don't think I'd be comfortable, leaving less than $25,000 there, knowing that we've got the process with regards to the EDC review, and so that's where I'm thinking at this point.
do you want to move that?
Why don't you move that?
I move that we leave $25,000 in the ED fund.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Wainwright?
Can I ask my colleagues if anyone else has any other of the supplemental items they want to discuss? Because I would be comfortable moving on to the capital item.
Councillor Garnett?
The additional downtown cleaning of $5,000. And I know I appreciate what your comments earlier, Mr. Hissick, about small amounts, but this is more for a specific reason. As a resident of West Sydney, I've heard time and time again of people feeling that they get less end of the stick on things. And this has been a common theme for the 20 some odd years I've lived there. And in particular, I'm referring to Ray Creek and the parklands that run along Westbrook, Northbrook, and in behind Greenglade. And for the last few years, they have not had regular maintenance. So, and I've heard about it regularly from the people that live along that stretch of road. So if I was to say I'm going to give $5,000 more to cleaning downtown when they face that every day in the summer and spring months, I'm going to face a lot of objection, and I wouldn't disagree with them because I've personally seen it. So that's an area where I just can't agree with it.
Are Are you suggesting 100,000 increase so that we can spread it around? Is that where we're, or?
What,
So,
No, I'm just saying the
Okay.
extra 5,000 for the downtown cleaning,
okay,
unless we're willing to
yeah,
put the same effort into
Sure.
that particular neighborhood.
okay.
These are people I have to see on a daily basis, and I know they're going to not be happy with that. And
Okay.
I wouldn't disagree with them. So
Right.
that's $5,000 I would like to see taken out.
Councillor Rintoul?
Yeah, thank you. I do, I understand that. I guess for me, we're talking about, I feel an item that has been identified, certainly through the election campaign, in terms of cleanliness in the downtown. I think it's our main street. It's where our tourists, have sort of first impressions. I kind of liked to see that in there to give us some latitude to make some more effort there, which I think for the betterment of the entire community who enjoys and uses our main street. And so I was comfortable seeing that there. I also note that we are looking to spend money around Ray Creek with respect to the dam and the assessment and some of the capital initiatives that are there. Certainly understand the spirit of your statement, but I felt fairly comfortable with that particular supplemental item. Thank you.
Just a question through to staff. It's my understanding, or with what occurred in 2018, that is the business community contacting the town, and there was a street cleaning initiative put on by volunteers that in the response that I think was very professional from Mr. Robinson back to the business community, it talked about it being an uncommonly dry summer, which doesn't allow for some of the natural cleaning that might otherwise occur. And was this perhaps put in the budget to realize how things might have changed in our downtown?
To you, Mr. Mayor, basically what we were looking at was approximately an hour and a half a week of an extra foot patrol in the downtown core, where we could actually, spend an hour on a Friday morning or a Monday morning, 45 minutes on 2 days a week to just walk the downtown, pick up some of that loose garbage that people don't really get to, that is the focal point of what people talk about. It's easy for us to get to the receptacles and do that on our regular budgets, but to do that, transition through the downtown core on foot, seeking out those bits and pieces that kind of draw the attention. That was the intent of that $5,000, was to add that little extra level of service.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you.
Or, sorry.
Oh,
No, go
were
ahead.
you-
Mr.
oh.
She was afraid.
Yeah, I know in the scheme of things, it's not a huge amount of money. But I, concur with the points that Councillor Garnett has made. Also, I guess it seems that this has arisen as a result of, I think, that one incident where there was, the street cleaning initiative and people complaining that we need to do something about our downtown streets. And I participated in that Sunday in the street cleanup. And, there was some cigarette butts laying around, and we did a fair amount of sweeping, but I wouldn't say that I was aghast at the uncleanliness of our streets. I think our streets overall are pretty good. So, it just sort of struck me sort of as a knee-jerk sort of response to one particular incident, and we spend a lot already in the downtown core, so I'd be happy with to live without that and find someplace else to spend $5,000.
Okay, perhaps if there's no discussion, or further discussion, if we would have a motion or a consensus to move on?
I'll make a motion to remove $5,000 for additional downtown cleaning.
Further discussion? Councillor Rintoul?
I'll just make the observation that we look at the number of visitors going up to downtown, the amount of traffic we hear, perhaps in some cases anecdotal, but in others from number of visitors and the impression it leaves. I would argue that it's probably, overdue that have been addressed. Thank you.
I share Councillor Rentoul's comments. Councillor Garnett, then Councillor Fallett.
As a point of reference, since you're talking about tourists, I've had family members from come into the community on various times, and we've walked the area, and they actually outright asked me who's responsible for maintaining the grass, and I was told it's the town, and they asked if we paid taxes. So that's a reflection on our town. People in that community pay taxes. They feel like they're already short-sighted, and in the interest of fairness, we got to make people feel like they belong, and there's already that rift. I live in that community, and I'm telling you, that's the way they feel, because I felt like it for many years myself. So I'm sorry, it just seems like a little thing, but it isn't, because when you see the grass 1.5 feet tall, I took a measuring tape. That's too long, and there's lots of hazards that go with it, but you can understand why they were frustrated. So I feel like I need to voice for them since they're not here. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
Councillor Fallett.
Thank you. I think we're the victim of our own success. We're a very popular town. We've definitely increased footsteps. Coincidentally to the call for volunteers to clean Beacon Avenue last summer, I was sitting out with a friend at Starbucks late one night and noticed that it was looking less than sparkling clean. So when that call came, I sort of said yes. And I think what it comes down to, and I have talked to staff about this, probably the largest visual impact is, as Councillor O'Keefe said, it's not about the cigarette butts that are there. It was minimal in that. It's the interlocking brick is past their best by date, and they're looking their age. And I don't think the extra cleaning is going to make a significant amount of difference. I think there's a lot of other areas, and as Councillor Garnett has spoken to, we've got garbage cans that need to be addressed. We've got grass that needs to be cut. I think we've done a lot for downtown. It's time to spread our work a little bit further afield throughout the town. So I would support this motion right now.
Okay, if I might offer a comment, in another place in the budget, there is an addition to garbage pickup in the budget, a small increase. I can't remember, something in the magnitude of 5,000. With regards to this particular issue, and I appreciate Councillor Garnett's comments, if that is indeed an issue, and I'd like to open it to staff in just a moment if they wish to comment on that area of town, but it's whether we deal with that and we make a decision on that if that's an issue. But versus this $5,000 for the downtown, I think we need to make a decision, is that necessary downtown or not whether or not something else is or is not happening in another part of the community. So if we could keep our focus on whether it's worthwhile, I would share Councillor Rentoul's comments that the town has become busier, and conditions are such that I think from time to time you would need to increase your cleaning budget if your traffic is increased. So if we could move forward on the motion, and then if we want to entertain a motion or request input from staff with regards to the West Sydney, I think we should keep them separate. Any further comment on the motion? I'll call the question. Sorry,
I was
Councillor.
just saying,
Duncan?
can you repeat it? Because I feel it was negatively phrased, right? It was the motion to remove, just to clarify. Yeah,
because
okay.
We have to do that, right? It has to be. So, yeah, so the motion was to remove $5,000 for additional downtown cleaning.
And I'll call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? So the motion is defeated. Do we have another motion or other discussion? Just with the comment from council, does staff wish the opportunity to comment on West Sydney and that area?
Yeah, through the chair, certainly, with all due respect, it's obvious that Councillor Garnett is the conduit for his community. Takes a lot of questions on that. But certainly we do in our offices with our request for service logs that are logged and tracked, and we make a point of trying to do an evaluation within 24 to 48 hours of a call in from a resident. Natural areas don't get the same level of service. The boulevard on Westbrook, on one particular incident when the grass was long, we were right in the middle of a fairly significant water construction area that year, and said, hey, we're not gonna go in this area. When it was brought to our attention, certainly within 48 hours, we attended to that position. So I appreciate it. We're certainly listening all the time to what our taxpayers say, and we react to the best of our ability.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Robbins. If we could then move on, are there other supplemental items that council members would like to discuss? Councillor Fallot.
Thank you. I'm going to direct this to staff, if I may. Under Parks, to list a building assessment. We've got $5,000 for a condition assessment of the building at Tallista Park. What type of lifespan currently exists in that building?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Fallon, that's the big question. Certainly, it's a raised building with a crawl space in it. There seems to be some rot on the exterior deck. We would like to get underneath that building and get a real good assessment of what the wood condition is like under there, so that we can give it an actual reasonable life cycle. It's certainly hard to throw a significant amount of maintenance money into a building that you don't really know structurally what the lifespan is. So to spend that money and to get a real good idea to say, hey, we think we've got another 10 years, we think we've got another 5 years, especially when you have a tenant in that building that's always looking to improve their presence in the building. We hate to see them invest in a building that we're not too sure what the condition is. So the idea is to get underneath there, get a real good structural assessment on it, have a real good look at it and say, hey, we're fairly confident that this is the age that is left in that building.
Okay, thank you. Under those circumstances, then I'm prepared to leave that in the budget.
Okay, are there other items, Councillor Duncan?
I was looking at the refurbished Pat Bay Highway sign, and I'm just wondering if, well, that it probably isn't something that, you know, we would be looking at canceling, but I'm feeling a deferral. I've never looked at it and thought it needed something to be fixed immediately, so I could feel comfortable getting rid of
Is there
that
a
one.
request to comment from staff on the condition of the highway sign or and it being in the budget?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly when you get up close to it, you can start to see it showing its age. The original gold lettering was done with gold leaf, which is a technology that is extremely expensive. We've had 3 quotes from a local sign shop showing different methodologies that we can use to maintain that gold color without going to that gold leaf, which you really can't apply in situ on a site with the wind blowing and things like that. So we looked at a couple of different methods on it. Will it last another year? Yes, it will. That might give council the opportunity to walk up there and have a real good look at it. It is a showpiece. It's the entranceway gateway into our community. It's just one of those concerns that we had. We do have a fairly firm price on it, so we know that we shouldn't see a lot of creep with the cost if we do wait another year. But certainly, if that was the wish of council, that would be reasonable.
Thank you. Councillor Fallot.
Thank you. Just back through you to staff, just to clarify, it isn't about a safety issue of the sign. This is about refurbishment from a visual perspective, not safety.
Through the mayor, that's correct.
Thank you.
Any further discussion, Councillor Wainwright?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just kind of a general comment. Deferring projects just makes things harder in future years. So it's not overall a great strategy, and where it's something that we feel needs to be done, and it's not a big ticket item, especially something as prominent as the entrance to Sydney, I'm okay leaving it in.
Okay. Is there consensus on council to move forward? If there's no other items to bring forward?
So we're just looking, sorry.
I think Mr. Hisik will take us to the capital budget.
So things like, so the,
Anything within the supplemental.
okay, so not the one-time request, oh, okay, that is those things.
Well, there are ones that indicate they're gas tax funded.
Okay, I'll leave those. I had some things that maybe could be funded elsewhere, but I guess we'll go through the capital stuff first.
Terrific.
Okay, just a bit of follow-up to what just happened. Staff will be following up with council on the recent snowfall event, so we'll come back and tell you what went right, what went wrong, what you might choose to improve, but the same comment goes for any kind of operating maintenance item that you wish to bring forward. Staff are ready, willing, and able to bring our operations to any standard you want that people are willing to pay for. So if it's more cleaning throughout the town, just let us know. We'll cost it for you, bring it back. And if you think people are willing to pay for that new standard, we're more than willing to make it happen. Okay, now getting back to capital. So we've seen this before, total capital budget over 8 million without the CSB carry forward, funded from a variety of sources, mainly reserves. Property tax funding has gone up to more traditional levels after a couple of years of reductions through gas tax. We've run out of gas tax to allocate. That's why we were seeing a big hit on that side. Your report identifies certain projects that could be deferred or funded through additional means. We covered this last time, but it's here for reference. Here's the gas tax funded project. So in reference to the staff report, we've identified 3 tax funded projects that we would be very comfortable in not doing this year. Those being the event tent and chairs, the Eastview Park seating, as well as the First Street sidewalk. If council wanted to defer those, we would reduce the tax impact by $88,600. And then we move on to certain gas tax projects which we believe aren't necessarily critical at this juncture. So if we were to defer these and reallocate the gas tax funding to another eligible project, and then in turn take funding from those projects and allocate them to tax-funded projects, that would lead to another $96,000 in savings. Putting all those together, it would have reduced taxes to 4.332% before the recent round of supplemental reductions. So does council wish to approve or modify any of the staff suggested deferrals?
Councillor Wainwright and Councillor Duncan.
So, with the exception of the event tent and chairs, which I would kind of break out for discussion, because that one I was okay with. The other ones I would move that we do.
Sorry, if we could, Councillor.
So
Sorry, are you making a
what
motion, Councillor Wainwright?
I'm moving that we cut these Eastview Park seating, the First Street sidewalk, that's the 10,000 and 70,000, and that those 3 gas tax funded projects be, well, the First Street sidewalk just canceled, it's already done. The other 2 be deferred, and that though that amount of gas tax funding, 96,000, be directed towards projects that are being funded out of the general capital reserve, and that the 96,000 that frees up goes towards capital projects that are funded by property tax. Okay?
Discussion? Councillor Duncan.
I actually feel that the sidewalks should go forward. One of the suggestions from staff was to defer the active transportation plan, with the rationale that we should wait until we have the OCP in place, and to defer the flood hazard guidelines, again, similar reasons. And I'm comfortable with that. knowing that one of the things we're going to be looking at when we get to the active transportation plan is that people are probably going to say, we have lots of areas in our town where there's gaps in the sidewalk. And I'd rather do the thing than pay for the plan to tell us to do the thing. And we can do the thing now. And these are infill projects. They're the kind of thing that when you walk partway down the street, you suddenly get to a part where the sidewalk has run out and you have to cross the street where there is currently no crosswalk, or there's no corner and the cars don't expect you to be there and you're going out from between parked cars. So I would rather just get the sidewalks done and increase the walkability of our town, which kind of relates to the flood hazard guidelines, which we're putting in place due to sea level rise because of climate change. And this is something making our town more walkable and putting in place really, in the grand scheme of capital, sidewalks are pretty low down on the maintenance and the cost compared to keeping up with the potholes and roads. That this, to me, feels like it's paying a little bit now for something that will meet a lot of objectives later.
Just a comment or a question through to staff based on one of the comments. In your staff report, Mr. Hissick, you did make recommendation with regards to the active transportation plan and the
Sea level rise.
Sea level
guidelines,
rise.
yeah.
But your recommendation is that we not, if we did withdraw those projects, that we not apply the gas tax to projects, given that we would have to carry them forward at some time.
It's just a recommendation. It's up for discussion. I'm not necessarily focused on that concept. I mean, we are facing a bit of a gas tax fund shortfall in 2020, but I'm thinking that with other work that doesn't get completed necessarily in the years we expect, that we won't actually have a shortfall there. But I'm not married to the concept of keeping it aside.
Okay. A further question for clarification. The First Street sidewalk lower down, $42,000. Given that it's completed, would that gas tax money is that part of being applied to other projects to reduce the tax increase?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Further comment on the motion? Councillor O'Keefe?
I was going to say no to the tents and the chairs, but I could live with that, and I'd support the rest of the motion.
The tents and chairs wasn't in the motion.
Oh, it wasn't?
No.
Okay.
So the motion is to remove the items there except the event tent and chairs.
Correct.
Separate discussion. Okay.
So it's not only, it's to remove the items above and below, or all of the items to the bottom.
Correct. Remove them from the budget, but not the tent and chairs. So we're going to
Yep.
get the tent and chairs. Yes.
Tent and chairs could be a separate discussion.
Separate motion.
Time
Yep.
is it?
Any other comments? I'll then call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? One opposed? Thank you. Do we wish to have a further discussion on the tent and chairs? Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, I would like to move that the event tent and chairs be removed from the budget.
Second.
Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion, those opposed? We have one opposed. Motion carries. Mr. Hissick.
The report further goes on to identify the library sidewalk as something that the reallocated funding should go towards, as well as the Galaran project. Is everyone in agreement with that? Okay.
I'm in agreement with that. Anybody wish to speak otherwise? Okay, thank you for that.
And would you still wish to pursue those operating deferrals as well? If they're not going to fund those?
Yes, sir. No, I'm clear from your report about deferring them just due to the reasons that you gave and the practical reason of you might not actually have the staff time available to do it on top of the other things. I'm okay with that, yeah.
So
And it wasn't because I thought I was going to get the tax
Okay.
saving out of it, yeah.
Further, I would like to leave them in the budget and leave it to staff as we begin the OCP process to determine whether it's worthwhile doing them or putting them off, and just adjusting the timing as per staff's recommendation with the OCP. Councillor Wainwright.
Through you to staff, given the motions that have just been approved, where are we in terms of percent?
With the same. Or
Well, it's, we've
we're at the 4.32.
just wanted to
That's fine.
confirm what the,
Oh, maybe we're down a bit.
We're at 4.04.
I have a question through to staff regards to the McDonald Park Road sidewalk. It's project number 159, 132,100. I can't recall how it's funded. It's not from tax. But my question through to staff is, given that the airport has built the walkway that goes there, is there still a need for a sidewalk in that stretch?
I've clarified that it's on the other side. It's on the Sydney side of the road.
Oh, the east side.
How critical it is at this point, I would like to defer that to Mr. Robinson.
Through the mayor, this one, there is a section in the middle that's complete, and then there's a section down on the south side of Henry, through a couple of businesses, where the Speed Pro, Slater Electric used to be, that area, there's no sidewalk there at all. And then as you get past, C-Star and into, the small little strip mall where Beacon Auto is and the deli is, there is no sidewalk that allures into that area there. The difficulty with that particular project will be that we will lose the parallel parking spots on that side of the street in order to allow for a little bit more of a pedestrian pathway through there. The property line builds up are very, very close to the edge of the curb on that particular area. So it's a bit of a dilemma in what's the best methodology. You're going to lose three parking spots right at the corner of Mills and McDonald Park Road, and there might be a couple more down on the south end closer to Henry.
Okay, so we're talking about the stretch between Henry and Mills.
Correct.
Now, in the I'll call it the job description, it mentioned that this came out of the West Lap consultation process.
Correct. It's a walkability to those little storefronts in there that the residential portion of the community was looking for.
Okay, having had the clarification that while it said west side in the document, it's actually east side, I'm supportive of it. Thank you.
That reference was to west side of Sydney, not the road, unfortunately.
I understand now.
Yeah.
I understand now. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other capital projects that council would like to see reduced that have not been identified in the report?
Councillor Keefe?
Did we, council chambers upgrades, was that here or was that in the supplementals?
That's here.
Okay. $5,000.
Councillor Wainwright?
through you to staff, what's the balance in our general amenity fund? Roughly.
Excuse me. Cue the Jeopardy music. Thank you very much. It's $79,000.
So to throw this out to my colleagues, there's something magical about getting just below 4%. And I wonder if my colleagues view the entrance sign to Sydney as an amenity for 10,000, because funding it out of that would cut 10,000 from the property tax funding, and I believe just pushes that across that line. So I'll move that we fund the highway sign improvement out of the general amenity fund.
No second.
Discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wainwright. Councillor Wainwright.
Council chambers, oh, sorry.
Sorry, Councillor O'Keefe.
So I was just, so it's $5,000 for council chamber upgrades? What did that cover?
The remaining portion that's been identified is perhaps looking at indigenous art in here. I think a lot of the upgrades have been done now to the chairs on this side, carpeting, painting the walls. What's left is perhaps council's chairs and some artwork in here.
So we're okay.
And so with that in mind, would the same principle not apply to the motion we just passed with respect to art as an amenity?
I have to say that I don't view improvements to the council chambers as an amenity.
Purchasing art? Purchasing art is not an amenity?
Exterior, yes. Interior.
Well, I'll just move it, that we remove 5,000 for council chambers upgrades. Second.
Any discussion?
Sure.
Councillor Wainwright.
Yeah, I would like to see us spending some money on indigenous art. The idea of replacing the very colonial symbolism that appears as the mayor does his, acknowledgement of traditional territory, seems to me worth a small expenditure. So I'm not going to support a motion to cut this.
Mr. Humble.
I should point out too that staff have already engaged the WSÁNEĆ Leadership Council to talk about the potential of undertaking this project, as well as part of our efforts on engaging and collaborating further with First Nations communities.
I would support,
Withdrawing the motion?
well, that's up to you. I support leaving the 5,000 in the budget.
Well, so if there's things underway already, then, yeah, I would withdraw then.
Any other further items, council members? Councillor Rintoul.
Just for the sake of similar discussion, I asked previously about painting the RCMP cell block. I see it's the same amount of money, $5,000. There was a comment there from staff that it should be completed within the next 3 to 5 years. So I'd be happy to see that removed or deferred from the budget. So I'll move removing painting of RCMP cells from the budget.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Councillor
Actually,
O'Keefe.
just have a question, because what I'm wondering, is it actually 5,000, or I had it down as, I think, a lesser amount, because North Saanich pays part of that, and you had another grant or funding from somewhere else. I think so was it actually 2392?
It's somewhere around that because of the North
Yeah.
Saanich and the provincial shares. So
Okay, so it's 2392 that we would take out from property tax. Do you want to amend your?
Well, I just want to remove the item, so.
Okay.
Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? The motion carries 4-3. Any further items?
Yes?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councillor O'Keefe?
So, thank you. So I'm still looking at the decorative street lighting for 30,000, and just wondering if there's any potential to fund that from gas tax or some other source. I'm also looking at, I guess if we were looking for more gas tax revenue to reallocate, I was looking at that waterfront walkway upgrade from Eastview to First Street. And I'm just wondering how far, whether that's something that we could consider reallocating to decorative street lighting or?
Okay. I would like to defer the question about the First Street sidewalk project completion to Mr. Robinson.
Okay.
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, that project has gone on phase for a couple of years. The final phase of that is as you're walking along that walkway, about the final 50, 70 meters has no railing on it. And that's been identified by our risk managers to be a bit of a risk issue on there. The railing goes along to a certain extent, and then where it turns to 90 degrees and heads back to First Street, there's about a 50-meter stretch there that has no railing. So that was the intent of that money was for that. It's been that way for many, many years, but again, it was brought to our attention by our risk managers, so we thought that we would complete that as the portion of that out of spending funds.
Okay.
And so, I'm sorry, just for clarification, that's the East View?
That's the stretch in front of the Eastview Park and going.
But we removed the funding from Eastview in a previous resolution?
Right. That was, unrelated.
Unrelated, this is different, okay.
Okay.
Through the mayor, that was, previous years, we did the brick walk in that area and did the paving stones in there, to finish that surface off. So the last outstanding item was that railing.
Okay.
And the question about using gas tax for our annual street lighting replacement addition program, I would have to get back to you on that and confirm, but it is one of our annual tax-funded items that we've had for a number of years.
Are there any other comments from council on budget items? Councillor Wainwright.
I'm not going to do it because I don't want to cut somebody off, but I would be prepared to make a motion to approve the budget as amended.
What's the amount, what are we at now? 393. Oh, okay.
So to be clear, I did not make that motion. But it's like going once.
Okay, so we have a motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Councillor O'Keefe.
I guess I did make the motion.
Did somebody second it?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay,
No, I
Let's-
think under 4% is, I think, reasonable, especially considering the significant other items that we had to deal with employer health tax and RCMP raises and infrastructure. So I'm happy. I think just under 4% is reasonable under the circumstances.
further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And thank you to
Okay,
Mr. Hissick
just
and
to,
your team of budgeters.
If I may just finish up. So what follows from here, we've got the financial plan bylaw will come forward in April, just ahead of the tax rates bylaw. And I'm planning to bring forward the utility rate changes through separate bylaws in March sometime, just so we can have those in place for the first quarterly billing. And that will conclude the process. But I just want to go back to this because, well, I was describing my own role in the process at the outset, but I must congratulate this new group of councillors who are going into this multi-million-dollar budget for the first time. Sure, we've given you lots of information, but it took a lot to get through it and to do it successfully. So you are now among the team of lion tamers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we have a motion to adjourn.
Move adjournment.
Second?
All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you again, everyone.